Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live stream. Today, we're talking about how you can effectively scale your product. So this is for product owners that we've in today's audience. And for today, what I really want to make sure that you get for today is the following things. We're going to talk about building custom implementations effectively. So these are things on top of your product. Supporting peripheral processes efficiently, so processes like around the core of your product. And finally, how these things will help in increasing the productivity of your development team. Now, if today you have a comment or a question, if you put it in the comments on LinkedIn or wherever you're watching this, we can pick it up live at the end. So make sure that if you have any question, feel free to put it in the comments and we will pick it up live during our QA. And then quickly about me, I'm Jesse. I'm the co-founder of Triggre, where I'm responsible for the product and the marketing. I have an MSc in software engineering. I have founded 3 SaaS companies so far, the first of which was at 19, and that was a while back. And I've worked with customers from like enterprise companies to SMB, so large and small, pretty wide range. And I'm happy to say that today we have Sylvester with us. Sylvester is a business automation expert. He's been a director in the past, a CTO for several companies. He's also an entrepreneur with several things under his belt. He has over 20 years of experience in the automation world, and specifically using no-code and low-code is his thing. Welcome, Sylvester.
Thank you, Jesse. Great to be here.
Is that a bit of an apt description for you?
It sums it up pretty good.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's hard to sum up 20 years of experience in this world, I have to say. I was going through it. I was like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So
I always notice that when I make my resume more.
Yeah. Yeah, at some point you just go like summarize it as 20 years of experience. But speaking of that, you do have a lot of experience. And what I like is also it's different companies, different software products, different implementations. What is one of the biggest challenges that you see in the market today, perhaps specifically for independent software vendors?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, maybe not from today, but more as a whole, is that when you're an ISV, you're apt to creating new software features. You're expanding your product. You're adding more functionality, but at the same time, you need to maintain your software. And there's always you always need to find a good balance between efficient maintaining your current product and supporting your customers the right way, while at the same time not obstructing your innovation and development projects, especially with developments going on like today, AI development. Many software want to do something with AI. How do you implement that in your current team without hindering the maintaining and development of necessary functionality? So I think that's a big challenge, aside from the personal challenge, of course, the staffing challenge. I think for ISV, that's a key challenge they need to address.
Yeah. So basically, so the pressure on sort of on the one hand, you want to scale, right? So you want to reach more customers, provide more service, and then you don't want to sort of, I would say, stretch maybe your development team. So what does that mean in practical terms, and why does that matter in the long run?
Well, there are a number of signs that indicate that your team is stretched to the limit. Increasing sick leave or fatigue. Creating more technical debt, backlog that is ever growing and not shrinking. I mean that there are all signs, telltale signs that say that your development teams are overstretched, and keeping that in balance means you have to make sure that teams are focused on the task at hand, and if you ever put more tasks into the same team, they will lose their focus and they will need to address multiple parts of the application with multiple processes, multiple functionality. And if you add more add-ons, if you keep expanding your product without scaling your team, Yeah, well, ultimately, you can't make a team just that big. I mean, you can put more people in, but that won't necessarily mean you're faster in development or more efficient in development. Most of the time, it's the other way around. You're less efficient, you're less productive. So then you need to think about your scaling strategy.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So yeah, because people sometimes like from a management point of view, it's always easy to think like, oh, look, we have 2 developers that are doing an awesome job. So if we have 4, we're doing twice the awesome job. And if we have 8, we're doing 4 times the awesome job. But
Yeah,
that's not how it works. You're ending up with 8 people probably doing like maybe 2 times the awesome job of the 2 people, because that's just how it works. Yeah, that's
true.
I've noticed that myself as well. It's hard to manage that in scaling up, and to sort of dive into that, I've sort of had a couple of cases, 2 cases that I wanted to discuss with you that I have a couple of questions about. So the first one. This is Linkco. Linkco is a company which had a challenge with providing customer-specific integrations on top of their platform. So a bit of an introduction, and I'll ask you a couple of questions on how you see this. So Linkco is a platform for fleet management. That's a very short description. It has many different features and options for all the aspects of fleet management for larger corporations who need to manage their fleet management, like their cars, right?
Hmm.
So this can be service companies, and but even companies who have just cars for their employees as a sort of an alternative to lease cars. But basically they have that platform, right? And then for customers, the platform obviously works best if it's very well integrated into their own systems and their own, let's say their processes, right? So this means that there are requests for, let's say, custom integrations, right? So custom integration
Hmm.
where data is retrieved from multiple sources at the customer, then combined, enriched, maybe with third-party information, and then sent to the Linkco platform and the other way around. Now, because different customers have different and often custom systems that they work with, Linkco often needs custom connections. So custom connections are needed for these different customers, right? So you see that this means more and more time needs to be spent on managing these custom connections, which sometimes include even like workflows or other business processes, just to make it seamlessly connect to the business of the customer. And ultimately, it meant sacrificing time of the development team to build and maintain those custom connections versus, like you just said, versus having the focus on the core platform. So you can imagine also even that potential customers may even go with a competitor if they cannot get this custom connection set up quickly enough, because they have a time frame for implementations. So that will put even more strain on the development team. Now, if you look at this case, what stands out about the scaling strategy here to you, Sylvester?
Well, to me, obviously, it's clear that they chose a strategy where they separated the custom development from the standard development, and I think that's in this case that's also a wise choice. If you choose to support your customers with custom development, and you fail to scale it in a proper way, and make your day-to-day development team that's maintaining your main application to handle also all these custom requests and custom connections, that's basically a situation where you can potentially obstruct your own roadmap, because as we all know, customer integrations and customer requests always come first, and always the first thing to fail is to follow the roadmap, because well, there's money involved, there are timelines, deadlines, so that's a constant deviation for the team from their main task, which is maintaining and expanding the current platform. So if you want to keep the main development team focused on the main product, it's wise to separate your custom development from your main development stream. So that's what stands out for me in this case.
Yeah. Also, we had a good comment that I wanted to highlight quickly by Roland. He said, additionally, the world has become more complex with specialized software, more cloud services, more options through AI-based solutions. Indeed, that adds on top of that, right? So it's you can see that the customer specifically. So for this case, right, the requests sort of they will sort of diverge a lot. Also because of all these new options that you can have, all these new things that you can implement, and then the question from customers are like, yeah, we want this little bit implemented, but given that all these customers have separate needs, the requests that they will do to you are also separate. And I like that you say that, because splitting sort of those custom builds, it doesn't even like, even sort of just from a, for me, from sort of, I would say, even sort of the architectural point of view, right? If you at least separate them from your core, that's what you're saying, right? If I understand correctly, that is key to this strategy, and that's why it will probably be successful, because you can then differentiate focus.
Yeah, well, that's second, of course, because the purpose you have with the software you build also dictates what technology you want to use and what architecture you want to use. And if you build a single monolith back office system, for instance, that's a bit older or a bit aged, and you want to integrate it with, if you want to make custom connections and you're using old technology that's made for back office administration rather than interconnectivity with other applications, then you're obviously going to fail massively. So you need to change your technology architecture for that purpose.
Yeah,
it's not only about the team; it's also about the choices of technology and architecture.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Indeed, yeah, and it's also indeed. So it's also a way to sort of make a bridge to the new world that maybe your customers live in. Yeah. If you sort of, in this case, right, they had to handle these customer specific requests, and they didn't want to build custom features into their platform, clearly, every time. Why is that such a common pain point, you think? Because I've heard this so many times from companies go like, hey, yeah, we're building this, but then customer A wants this, customer B wants that. Why is that?
Well, in fact, then we go back to one of your first questions, where we spoke about focus of the team and maintainability of the application. I mean, any form of custom build, and any ISV who has dealt with those kinds of questions knows about it. If you're an ISV, one of the no-goes is that you build custom features into your standard product, because it creates a problem with maintainability. With every version, you have to wonder whether or not your custom built part is hit by any changes you made to the base functionality, and that makes it more complex to either maintain or even release your basic problem, and that's not what you want. I mean, that takes away your speed, it takes away your flexibility, it takes away your possibilities to expand and to make choices that are strategic for your product, because you have that one or two customers that are relying on certain functionality that's incorporated in your base function, your base application, and you don't want that. So either you make custom functions that you declare as a standard for your whole application, or you separate your custom development from your core software.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. So in this case, and the reason that I know about this case is because Linko decided to use Triggre for the custom connections. And this allowed them basically to use a different approach than using their development team. So they allowed their implementation experts to build these workflows that are specific to customers, background processes, specific connections, and that greatly reduces the strain on the development team, and it decreases the time it takes to onboard new customers, right? Because you can, like you said, like you have a backlog and it's growing, and then the question is like, when do we have time to implement this new customer versus we also have to develop our backlog. This is always the discussion, I guess. So if you take into account that they took this approach, with all these sort of different and complex integrations to manage, how would you think, like, because Triggre basically is no code, so it's like we really position that, it doesn't take technical experts to do all the work. What is your view on how to handle that without losing speed? Like, yeah, would you consider this versus what are some of the alternatives, I would say, to using something like Triggre? What are other ways that you would separate this? Because you can separate the code, I guess, but it would still weigh on your development team, or you'd hire external developers, right? Or something, because even if it's not your core team, you still have to man it with people.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, how do you see this, like, versus not losing speed, that they wanted to use basically implementation experts that are in the implementing the software at the customer?
Well, there are a number of advantages that you have when you decide not to use traditional software, full code development, but use low code or no code tools like Triggre. One of the main advantages is that tools that like Triggre that have the core technology implemented doesn't need you to rebuild technology every time around. I mean, the basic technical aspects like the REST protocol, like JSON content, etc. That's managed by the application, and that's part of your technology platform. So you can focus on really the functional parts of the connection, which gives you a tremendous advantage and a tremendous increase in speed of development and deployment, because what you deploy is less complex, it's less technical by nature, it's more functional. You can focus your tests on the functional content because basically the technology is already working. You're not changing anything in the technology, so you don't have to manage your core software. You can manage your configuration, you can manage your content of your application, which is more functional. So you need less technology, you need less handover in information. You can connect business people, implementations specialists directly to your customer without losing any information in the transfer. So that makes your information period smaller, your building period smaller, and easier deployment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about. It's clear that obviously your implementation expert not having to deal with like sending information to an implementation team or to a programming team and then having them to deliver, but it's also indeed, like you said, you sort of take advantage of all the bases that is already in whichever platform it is that you use, whether it's Triggre or something else. That because that platform also builds on, right, and you get new features, new options, new things for so that it's also then in the future you sort of don't have that maintenance work to do yourself, and that's also indeed I can imagine a very big advantage. And indeed smaller, let's say smaller team that can handle the implementation at the customer is also a big advantage, as you say. If you see this, right, this strategy, do you think that other companies would easily be able to implement the same strategy? I mean, here the strategy was already chosen before I knew this case, and but I can imagine that there are some prerequisites that you would need before you can actually sort of implement something like this, where you say like, hey, for these custom things, we'll use a custom approach, but outside of our development platform, maybe even like specifically for a no-code or a low-code solution.
Well, there are two things. First, the strategy you choose for scaling your team is no one size fits all. There are many ways you can scale your team. You can scale up the staffing of your team. You can split teams. You can move to outside sources. You can hire new personnel. You can hire external specialists. There are all kinds of ways you can scale. But in the case you scale like this, where you put a low-code or no-code platform on top of your backend development, one of the prime prerequisites, I would say, is that you have a consistently working API. I mean, the basis between your custom development with low-code, no-code platforms versus your traditional software platform is that you have a steady connection between the connection platform and your backend. I mean, that should be a stable factor, because anything you do on the customized side is handled by the low-code platform, and then standardized for the backend platform. And that integration should be seamless, and it should be smooth, and it should be performing.
Yeah, it should not change with every release that you do of your platform, for example, because then you do have the problem that all these custom connections need to be revisited and changed and updated. Yeah, so you need to have a good let's say a very solid API strategy, which is you have those those 5 levels of maturity, but it needs to be very mature in order to implement something like that. That's a very, very good point, and I actually fully agree with that, because that's something that you can easily overlook, and you can very happily start and have 2-3 customers customized, and then being hit with an API change and you have to revisit all of them. That's not fun. Then you're back to square one.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. And following that, you of course also need a good information model where you exchange information and have a good alignment between the teams that are working on the connections and the teams that are working on the core platform.
Yeah,
there needs to be full transparency in what they're developing, how, why, and when, so that the connection teams are not surprised. The connection team is not surprised by any changes made in the backend, and the other way around. You need to fully understand how the interface between the low code and the platform and the backend platform is working.
Yeah.
You don't have any discussion about that, and you can focus fully on whatever customization is necessary for the client.
Yeah. Yeah, clear. So good API strategy, good documentation strategy, and processes in place.
Ownership also important.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, I guess this is sort of where it circles back indeed to product ownership, where you have to be, as a product owner and product manager, you have to be that person who makes sure that this is in place, right?
Yeah,
that's your job. Okay, then let's check another case that we ran into. This one, it's anonymized because I'm not allowed to share specifics. So I'll call it example. And their challenge was in peripheral processes around their platform. So not specific to customers, but peripheral around what they did, even for their customers, for certain customer groups. So basically, example has their platform, right? Just like Linko. And it's also developed and maintained by their development team. And then to support this new onboarding process, they needed a lot of work. Basically, this is for a part of their customers who come in through this new onboarding process, and these customers have to be thoroughly checked, including like with third-party services. And to give you an idea, it's sort of similar to how banks check customers in their Know Your Customer process, their KYC process, if you know that term.
Yep.
So it's a lot of like checking, let's say, stuff like credit rating, perhaps stuff like you can consider like whether your address is correct, so it's a bunch of these stuff, sort of to things to make sure that that fraud is prevented. And to minimize the pressure on their development team, example chose to use Triggre to implement the onboarding process. Now, when a large partner asked whether they could use a similar onboarding process, but white labeled, so that partner wanted to have it under their label, this was the second peripheral process that was implemented on top of the platform. And it was sort of similar to the other one, but specific to this partner. And after that, other processes such as compliance can be implemented in a similar manner. So if you look at this situation, right, how do you see their approach to scaling without compromising their in-house team? How do you see this? Because this is a different case. And for these onboarding things, they didn't use their core team, but they used, in this case, let's say more, I would say, innovation experts at their company who understand the processes, but not necessarily are coders for this.
Yeah. Well, it's basically it's the same problem. I mean, you have functionality you need to develop, and you make choice not to do that in your core platform team, but you to put it in a separate stream for different reasons, scaling mostly.
Yeah.
In this case, it's not about customization, the customer process. It's about separating a certain specific process that has certain specific needs and requirements in relation to the core platform. I mean, I'm not familiar with the details of the case, but I can imagine that if you have a platform that's designed to do a certain process in your backend or within your company, and you're suddenly need to implement a process that's either or both, in this case, customer facing and interfacing with other applications. Your core platform may not be suitable to do that. You can choose to make your platform suitable to implement a full-fledged process, but that distracts your development team from their core platform tasks again. And they made the choice apparently to do that in another technology or another process and another team with different skill set. In this case, more business oriented and more focused on compliance. So again, you're putting business knowledge close to the customer needs, and enabling the team that's working on the onboarding and the compliance and that's managing the whole customer due diligence process to focus on those compliance requirements and not be led, of course, by anything that's happening in the platform. So you're avoiding the discussion between compliance needs and platform functionality by isolating the process and making sure that it's a separate process that happens before you enter the platform. And in this case, it's possible because it is a separate process. Of course, it's
exactly.
an integrated process. Then it's a lot harder to do. But in this case, it's very easy to do, and you can keep the focus of the current team and sharpen the focus of the new team.
Yeah, you can also sort of potentially, you could say, like there might be a different speed at which you want to innovate with these things, because I can imagine that specifically in your platform you want to innovate with certain things at a certain speed, whereas towards the customer, especially in such a white labeled case, right? You have one partner who has this very specific. It's a specific need for their basically for their customers. Then it allows you to keep both the platform at the high speed of innovation, while you can still offer to your partners or customers a similar level of innovation that they might expect from you, I would say, given that they use your platform and you are able to innovate very quickly. But like you said in the beginning, I guess if you start putting all that weight on top of your development team, without even if you scale them, then at some point that will slow you down, because then you do need to put more effort into that, and it does slow you down. So there might be a difference also in sort of the speed at which you innovate in these two, I would say, two levels, right? The one level being the external process, peripheral process, and the other one being the platform.
Yes, I think that's a bit the same as the case we discussed previously, but also on top of this, I think what's also important is that because you separate the technology, it's much easier to deploy new developments. I mean, if you have to follow all the changes that happen in the compliance world with all the new regulations from Europe and national rules you have to follow, if you deploy all those features on your base platform, you would have to have a release strategy that enables you to release all that new developments on top of your core platform, and that's a massive undertaking. If you have a wide platform that supports all kinds of business functions, and you have to do deployments because of compliance reasons, that puts a large strain on your release train, of course. And if you are able to separate that compliance process, and you're able to innovate on that process and release often and quickly, you're putting a strain on your core development team, and not only are you able to innovate quickly because you can easily add or change functionality in that process, but you're also able to release it very quickly, which is also necessary for clients. Of course,
Yeah.
you need to if you're white labeling it, you need to be certain that you not copying anything, but you're maintaining it centrally, so you have the same project release. Otherwise, you're creating just the same problem as you have with traditional software
Yeah.
development.
That's a very good point
I
indeed.
assume that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. 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 And indeed, like it's so I guess like it depends, given the example of compliance, it depends, you say, but whether that's a core feature of your platform where it makes sense to develop that. If you are a compliance platform, then it makes sense that you develop that. But if it's not a core feature of your platform does like Linko, like right fleet management type things, then even though you need that for your peripheral process, it might not be worth building it into the core platform, because this way you separate really what you focus on very specifically with your development team, saying like, okay, we're really focused on the core of what we do. That's our core platform. And that's also sort of how I guess you can sort of see it as how the that's described in Crossing the Chasm, where you say like, look, the core platform is what you get in the first year of your company. The core platform is like the core technology. That's what your first innovators will love. But then at some point, to cross the chasm, you need to have these like augmented things, rings around your platform that people just expect, right? Like compliance, like onboarding, like other things that they might just expect from you. And then you need to separate them, at least logically, from your core, is what you're saying, if I understand you correctly. And then on top of that, there's a question: hey, which technology can we use
Yeah.
for that? And in these cases, why would you use? When would you use traditional development versus maybe a low code or no code solution? What would be some of the reasons why you would consider one or the other?
Well, one of the reasons, which is an obvious reason, could be that you're developing on top of a backend system that's not meant for exposing to customers or exposing to the outside world, and you need some kind of portal function or some interaction with your customer because you want to automate processes. For instance, if you have a system that's built in the 80s or 90s of the previous century, and your the system was built in a process where you would exchange paper forms through traditional mail, and you want to automate the information exchange, you can build a portal to automate those forms and offer them to your client directly without changing your core business process, but by exchanging the information from the portal to the backend. So you're automating your paper trail through a digital trail. That could be one reason, and doing that in your core business system that's developed in older technology and maybe not suitable for exposing to the outside world, could give you a large sense of speed and flexibility if you put it in new technology, new architecture, and do it in a low code or no code system, because that's ultimately suitable for those kinds of purposes. So having traditionally developed software that's well, a bit older and not suitable could be a big reason. Another reason is speed and flexibility on itself. I mean, having separate technology from your back end enables you to prototype, enables you to do experiments, do A/B testing, do try things, move with the flow, what's happening in the business, process feedback very quickly, so you can very swiftly adjust your application and your functionality to whatever customers need. So you're much more flexible, much more agile, I would say, in how you cope with feedback from your markets and your customer groups than you are when again, if you have a legacy system where you need to process all the feedback and then also have to have a release train where you quickly release all those changes to the market, puts again a strain on your sitting development team, because they're not used to that process. They don't needed that process before. They are also apt to remain in their current process. We always release once a year, so we're not going to change that because that's our routine. But you need to release every week.
Yeah.
So that's a struggle. And if you separate the two, you have a flexible front end that you can use to change quickly, and you have the stable background that's not hindered or blocked by anything you do on that front side.
Yeah.
And again, you need that API. You need that.
I was gonna ask that, like, what the same as for the others. Can other companies easily implement this strategy? I guess like the same requisites, right? Because you said in the beginning it's sort of like the same case, but you just take a different approach to it. It's like you take a process approach to it instead of a customer approach.
So, yeah,
So I'm assuming it's the same good API strategy you named, stable, mature, and good documentation, and it requires, let's say, a steadfast product owner. You said,
yeah,
yeah.
true.
And what could you highlight maybe something as a key learning from other software vendors from this specific case, like something that maybe they can take and think like, how can I maybe think about this for my situation that they might have?
Well, I think you need, if you want to do something new, or you want to do something innovative, or you need something that's different from what you have done so far, you need to ask yourself the question: to what purpose am I doing this, and what are the requirements? Not the functional requirements, but what are the requirements for the process that I need to implement? For instance, if you need quick, fast, steady releases without having a lot of overhead, um, uh, versus I have a legacy system that has a steady process and a release train and a certain schedule. If that's bites each other, if that's opposing has opposing interests, then you might consider separating one from the other. On the other hand, you need to be very careful in what you separate and how much you separate. I mean, essentially, if you separate core processes into other technology, you're creating an interaction problem for yourself, and also a maintainability problem. So it is imperative that you ask yourself the right question. A product owner asks himself and the business the right questions. What do I want to achieve with my solution? If it's something new, something innovative, something deviant from your base core application, I think then that's perfectly fine to consider other technology and other teams and other strategies. If you're expanding current functionality that's core for your core process, um, I think your first way of working would be that you do that in the core application that you already have. So
Yeah.
it's very depending on the goal you want to achieve.
So if you take that idea of would you say then, because my question is, if you look at these two cases, right, what is something that you would advise product owners to do immediately if they would be facing similar problems that we discussed in these cases? Would that indeed be to really clearly get the goal, or see if there may be a separation of goals from some of the questions that probably sales comes in with, right? Because these two things, I think they are sales driven, like or innovation driven, maybe in the process case, but there seems to always be some form of customer delivery behind it. What would they be able to do, sort of, to get a feel for, hey, this could be a strategy that would work for me, if they're currently in the situation where they're developing their product, they have their development team, but they've never sort of thought about, hey, which parts might I be able to separate? What could be something that would be a first step in order for a product owner to see if this would be the way to go for them, also to make their product teams more productive?
Well, I think the first question you have to ask yourself, or maybe your stakeholders, is why. Why are we
Yeah.
doing it? Is this something we need? Is this something we want? Is this an opportunity? Is this managing a threat? What are we doing?
Mhm.
Why are we doing it? And the second question, I think, is that you need to look into how this impacts the team. I mean, does it require the team to change its way of working? Does it require the
Yeah.
team to master new technologies? Does it require the team to think differently about the application? Does it change the goal of the application that you're currently maintaining in a profound way, in a fundamental way? If any of those aspects are touched, then you have an indication that you might want to consider to either choose to set a separate team on that
Yeah.
assignment, or choose other technology. I mean, those decisions can be made separately. It's not
Yeah.
necessary, in my view, to do both.
No, you
Can be
could,
both.
but you do say like you want to basically it's better to work with several smaller teams than with one large team because that's just more efficient, right? And more effective. Is that sort of
Depending on the
somewhere the
size of your
core?
application and the goal of your
Yeah, yeah,
application. I mean, as your application grows, you also increase your part of maintenance. Of course, you want to effectively manage your maintenance. You can do that within the team with AI solutions, code helpers, whatever. But if you are doing something that's completely deviant from the goal that you had when you built application A, then you might consider building application B on top of A or next to A or whatever, and have a team focus on that. Because if you increase the functionality of your core platform and you keep it within a separate team, you're either going to get a large, unmanageable team of about 20, 30 people that
yeah,
need to be micromanaged because nobody knows who's doing what. Or you're creating a team with a lot of specialists where knowledge is put in people's minds and not documented, and the process is not managed. And if you have a structurally different kind of functionality you want to release, my choice would be to put it in a separate team.
yeah, yeah.
For instance,
Clear.
if you have a team that's building a finance system and you're suddenly asking them to add CRM functionality,
Yeah,
you might
that
not
might not be a
identify
good fit, right? Yeah,
people
yeah,
because that's a totally different purpose of the application. So you might want to put it in a separate team, not necessarily a separate technology,
yeah,
but you want to have a team that's focused on the CRM and a team that's focused on the finance part.
yeah,
Same goes when if you have a back-end team and you suddenly need a front-end portal, then you need other people. You need people who know something about user interaction. You need people who know something about interfacing. You need people who know something about the business, opposed to the people that are working on your technology, your application. So
yeah.
it depends on your goal, on your
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is the last question I have, and then we'll go to the live Q&A. But is there one sort of, or maybe two or something, like big reasons for product owners or product managers to not look into expanding their product in sort of a similar way? You know, the splitting it up, basically logically. What would be holding them back, if at all?
You mean if you decide not to?
Yeah, let's say you're in a position where we've not thought about this. What would be some of the arguments for them to say, like, we're just going to keep doing this the way that we do because this is how we do it, and maybe what are some of the questions that then sort of they can ask themselves to see if that's how they are behaving. Like what are, I guess my question comes down to, what would be holding companies back to use a similar approach to productivity? What kind of arguments would they be using that hold themselves back, that they might not even realize?
Well, one of the arguments that I've encountered, in my view, is we've always done it this way, so why would we change it?
Never heard that.
It always worked for me, so why all these new things?
Yeah, yeah,
Why not
yeah,
continue the way we are working and just hire a few more people to do the job?
yeah,
That's the most used argument. I mean, it also depends on the team you're working with. I've worked with teams that are very traditional and came up with these kinds of arguments not to change anything. And I've worked with teams that were so eager to change everything that you had to hold them back, because otherwise you would have a landscape of different applications and all kinds of initiatives that weren't manageable at all. So
yeah,
there are reasons for both sides, but sticking to what we know is a very human factor, and especially when it comes to more legacy like applications, where not much innovation and development is done in the technology side. Developers tend to stick to what they know, and are not eager to seek for new approaches. So that's something that a product owner needs to take into account when convincing a team to move towards other horizons, or again choosing to set another team next to the current team to make those innovations work.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. Thanks. We have some questions. Roland also had a question. It's sort of split into two things. First is pretty long. I'll read it up, saying modernizing old, in quotes, processes always should come with a review if there's a better way to implement it, and check if it can be done in a better and more modern way. If not, you might end up with moving a shitty analog process into a shitty digital process, right? Sort of the garbage in, garbage out kind of situation, instead of actually making a fancy digital process. And he adds to that, and that's, I think this one is important to say, and make it business focus driven instead of tech led. Yeah, I guess that's always like, it comes down to that, right? It's sort of what you said as well. Like, you have to think about what is the goal and what is the best road then to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, that's then, and then one of the questions can be, hey, we need to separate it. So that would be the first steps, realizing we need to separate something. And then the second step is, what technology do we use for that? Is that low code? Is that no code? Is that traditional development? Is it a piece of paper and a pen?
Yeah.
That is sort of then the next
well,
step,
it all comes down to the why, what, and how. I mean, we discussed the why in this discussion, and focused a bit on the what and the how. Aside from choosing technology, choosing your team, choosing your process, is also how to translate whatever you want to implement into effective functionality. And I couldn't agree more with Ronald about this. I mean, yes, you should, and that's another factor. Also, the business can come up with the argument, we've always worked this way, so why would we change anything?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. In other sessions, I have promoted very much to always make basically business cases for features that you develop in your platform. I've given people sort of some of the ways to do that, and I think that is always the case. And I think really good product managers and product owners always make at least an estimation of what the business value is. Sometimes it's hard to say, of course, when you develop something for a potential market or something where you see opportunity, but it should always be something that you keep in mind, and not just like, ooh, let's do something with, and then insert some technology, because we've been there, what was it, like 10 years ago with blockchain, and now with AI, where arguably AI is more interesting from a usability point of view, but it's still, you see that sort of we have to do something with AI is sometimes taking precedence over, is it actually adding value, speeding up the development? Is it, if we build it into our platform, is it something that our customers will actually be able to reach their goals with faster, those type of things, and then are they willing to pay for that?
Yeah. Well, I think the whole goal setting is the key here. I mean, we're asking ourselves too many times the questions, what do our customers need? The real question is, why should they need it?
Yeah.
What goals can they achieve by using our software, by using our product, and how's AI going to help, or any tool is going to help by it? I mean, AI is not a goal itself. I mean, I talk to people, entrepreneurs, other companies. And a lot of times you hear people in the boardroom say, we need to do something with AI because AI is trending and we need to do something with it, and here's a budget and do something with AI. But AI, it's a means to an end. It should be adding value to whatever you're delivering. It's a tool. It's a precious tool. And last I used the example that if we at some point we had phones, right? And then came the microchips, and then came and then we saw the opportunity to create a mobile phone. And it's not that we needed to do something with the microchip, but we saw an opportunity for product innovation by using new technology, and that became the mobile phone. Yes. And that's an example of how you use new technology to improve an existing product. And the same goes with AI. You have existing processes, existing products, existing software, and how can you improve that process, that software, by adding value using AI, by improving the way you reach your business goals? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the real
It's
question.
just another tool in the toolbox,
Yeah.
right? I like this question that we got. You mentioned, I guess this is me, because I think I mentioned this, that these solutions can be built at least partially by implementation experts instead of the development team. Isn't that a huge risk? I am going to pass this on to you, Sylvester. Isn't that a huge risk? Because
Um,
I can imagine it is. I mean, yeah, but
yeah, the key is two keywords: huge and risk.
yeah,
Um, is it a risk? Yeah, that's a discussion I've had with people in business many times. Everybody has a different view on it. Some people embrace citizen development and say it's great that business people can make functionality. Other people despise it and say no, business people can't make software. And there is a difference between building an application and building functionality. I mean, building an application requires skills about how you build a software application, how your architecture works, how you interact, how you build processes, how you maintain it. Building functionality is much easier, much simpler, and of course you shouldn't be working with people that have no clue what they are doing. That's also not the case. But on the other hand, you don't need people that are that know from how to build a PHP application from scratch. So you
exactly.
can use people that are closer to the business, not necessarily alone in the business, but are closer to the business, like business analysts, like information analysts, like process experts, that you can educate in using a tool with an ICT oversight. And that's always the question: how deep is your governance going? So is it a huge risk if you let it go? If you I usually compare it to using Office, for instance. If you give people Office and say, okay, do your thing, they're going to build all kinds of Excel sheets
Yeah,
and documents and all kinds of things that nobody controls, nobody knows what's happening. So you need to consider what kind of governance do I want over that process. You need some kind of governance, and especially support from your ICT experts to help ensuring that it's secure, ensuring that it's compliant, ensuring that it fits within your company's landscape. Of course, you need that, and if you don't do that, it's a huge risk. If you do that, you can manage it to a very acceptable point.
yeah, yeah, clear. Matteo asks, how would you handle QA in a situation where you have these add-ons that are not part of the core product? I guess this is true for both cases, right? They are not part of the core product. I'm assuming they mean using it in terms of like when it's not also in a regular development stream with like coders who would have unit tests and you name it. How would you handle QA in this situation? Indeed, it's an interesting situation that you
Yeah,
that they
true.
ask too. Yeah,
And of course,
QA being quality assurance. I'm not sure I mentioned that, but quality assurance. So testing it,
yeah.
whether it works. Yeah, we're a little bit deep
We
in it,
assume
and I
people,
just noticed that I
we assume people
take
don't.
over the
That's not the case.
abbreviation. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, quality assurance. Whenever you make a software, whether it's low code, no code, or full code, I mean, you need QA. You need quality assurance. You need to test what you're doing, because that's with everything you do. Even if you make cars or if you make coffee machines, you need to test if they're working.
yeah,
And that's the same with this. You need quality assurance. What's different in this case is that your use cases, what you're testing, are very focused on what you're actually building. So your unit tests and your integration tests can truly focus on the functionality you're building in that platform or with that team, because that's what they're doing. And if you have separated technology, it's also there's a very clear separation between the backend and where you're connecting to, or the other system you're connecting to, and the thing you are building. So there's a very clear borderline between the two, and
yeah,
that's different from when you're building that innovative new process into your core system. Because if you do that, you constantly have to move towards your integration tests and your regression tests to ensure that what you're doing is not messing up the application as it is. So
yeah,
in a sense, it's making your quality assurance process easier, because you have that truly solid API separation between the two systems. And as long as that API is stable, you can focus your tests
Yeah.
on a separate part of
Yeah,
the.
it basically minimizes the point of contact with the testing, I guess, in a
Yeah,
way,
the risk of
right? Yeah,
interfering with standing processes
yeah,
is far less.
yeah. Interesting. We have time for one more. Let's see. This one I like as well. Isn't the maintenance work that you save on your development team just shifted to the implementation team? I think we touched on this a little bit because we did say partially, like, yeah, you do take advantage of if you use a platform for all these integrations. The platform is obviously is maintained and updated by other people. So you do, like, for example, for Triggre, like we also release our platform, right? So you do get updates in that, security updates, you name it. So that is an ongoing thing. But it is true. I mean, yeah, changes that, for example, you make in your API, they do get shifted onto your implementation team.
Yeah.
Isn't that a problem? Isn't that just like just the same work done by other people?
Well, yeah, it can be a problem. I mean, if you have again, if you have a fast iterating process that you're developing, that you're constantly changing, that's innovating, that you're learning, and you need fast deployment, that's
Yeah,
an issue because every time you do the maintenance, and you're depending on the maintenance on the rest of the application before you can deploy anything, and that holds you back in your speed. So is the maintenance work shifting towards the team that's doing the other? Yes, it is, of course, but it is contained to the part they're working on, and especially if you separate the technology again, it's easier to do the changes there and test them and deploy them because you know where your boundary is, you know where it stops. So you're less at risk if you're in a fast-paced changing environment versus the slower change environment of your core application.
yeah, indeed.
But maintenance needs to be done. Let's be
Yeah,
clear about that.
yeah, yeah. You don't get away from that,
But
sadly.
we also know that if we make applications more complex, more larger, and we make monolithic applications, that maintenance is going to be an issue in the end. And then you get the legacy systems we know today from
Yeah,
the ancient world of the beginning of automation. And it's not. We were now building applications using microservices, using APIs, and that's for a reason because that contains smaller parts of functionality that are easily tested, easily contained, easily managed.
yeah,
And whether you do that in the same application or you do that in another application is indifferent. The core phase is that you focus your maintenance on a separate, isolated piece, of which you know the stable interaction with the rest of the application is indeed stable.
yeah. Indeed. So it's about splitting it into smaller parts, and then for each part, you can decide what the best way is to handle it.
Yeah.
If we summarize, thank you for your time today, Sylvester.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure to hear all these ins and outs of how you think about this and how you view this. I also want to thank everyone who asked questions today because that's very helpful. Yeah, check us out. We'll share content about this type of stuff on LinkedIn often. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks, Sylvester. See you soon. And
You're welcome.
everyone, thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye bye.